I'd like to welcome everybody to Keystroke Live. I'm going to mute everybody while I'm giving the presentation, and then I'll open it up for questions towards the end. Today we're talking about INI files and startup switches. The main difference between these is that INI files, you have a few more choices, but otherwise they can pretty much do the same things. Just a little bit about Keystroke Live. It's every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, same place, same login information. And we have brief topical subjects related to keystroke, software, training, that sort of thing. And the first Monday or Wednesday of every month is with our president, Michael Gebb, and he always gives some unique perspectives on keystroke as well as some things to expect in the future. So with INI files and startup switches, as I mentioned, they can pretty much do the same thing. It's just how you apply them to keystroke. They pretty much allow keystroke to have different settings on different computers. If all you're doing is running keystroke on a single computer, you probably are not going to need startup switches or specific customized INI files. But some of the common things that you might do this for are for printers or print buttons. So you might have a Star printer on one point of sale station, an Epson printer on another one. You might, at one point of sale, you're always going to print to a laser printer, 8.5 by 11 invoices. Other computers you might always print to a receipt printer. So that's one of the big things that it's used for. Also can be used to have different pin pads and signature capture devices on various computers. And it can also control the configuration and appearance. And when I talk about configuration, I'm pretty much talking about the various parameters in keystroke, in sales and purchases, in accounts receivable, that sort of thing. All of those can be controlled by startup switches or INI files. Now, so it's really up to you how it works, but you can, on your target line, only use a /R switch, which is a register number, or INI file equal with the path to the file you want to use, and everything else can go in the INI file. You can also just put it on the target line. From a tech support standpoint, doing a lot of this on the phone, sometimes it's easier with inexperienced computer users to have it on the target line because they can read that off to you, whereas trying to find an INI file to figure out the configuration or change it can be a little more difficult. And I do want you to reference the help files in Keystroke. There's two main pages, and I'll show you these in a little bit, on startup switches and INI files. I still refer to them even though I practically have it memorized, but sometimes I need a little help, and it gives all the different things that Keystroke can do. There is also an ws.ini file in the Keystroke files folder that gives examples of all the different switches that Keystroke can use, and I will show you that as well. Now, something to take into consideration. If you're going to use startup switches or INI files, there is a priority that Keystroke looks at those. The startup switches are the first priority. So if you have something in an INI file that says make this machine number 4, but your startup switch says make this machine number 3, your startup switch is going to win. So startup switches, or those that go on the target line, are what is going to trump everything. Then the individual INI files based on register number, the number here in number 2, the WS number.ini, refers to the register number. And remember, with Keystroke, your register number is always 1 unless you tell it otherwise. Then there's a global WS.ini. That's great for things that you want to happen at every single computer. Maybe what your title bar says, or your colors and those types of configurations. Those could all go in the global INI file. But remember, if something conflicts with what's in this one, the ws.ini, it's going to take as gospel, so to speak, what's in the ws register number.ini or in the startup switch. The INI files do allow for a few more options compared to startup switches. Most of those options are related to multi-store and complex situations, but we'll kind of take a look at some of those. The other thing that's nice about INI files is they can be backed up with your keystroke data. By default, they're in the data folder. So if you back up the entire data folder, you will have a backup of those INI files. With startup switches, it's also a good idea to document those, put it in a document in a safe place, so if a computer goes down and it needs to be replaced, you have some sort of document to go, okay, these are the switches this computer was using. Some of the most common switches or INI file settings we see in Keystroke: the /R on the target line, or register equal in the INI file, which designates the register number. A /P on the startup on the target line for a startup switch, or printers equal. Also machine numbers. This happens to be the same whether it's in an INI file or on the target line. A configuration switch, which is a /C or config equal. The U and K switches for temporary user files and resource files, or user dir and kstemp, or sometimes just the INI file switch. Now with all of these, there's going to be a file name after them. So let's take a look in Keystroke. And we're going to take a look at the help file. We're just going to go to Sales Manager for right now. And if I hit F1 Help, and I'm going to make sure and share that so you can see it. If I go to the index, I can go type in startup, and we have startup switches. Or if I type in INI, I have INI files. Let's start with startup because those are the ones that are most common. The main startup switch file gives just a brief list of everything that's possible with startup switches. And then you can click on it and it'll give you a little more information. So let's look at /P for printer switches. It says it uses an alternate printer file. For printers, the default file is printers.dat. That's what Keystroke's going to use unless you tell it otherwise. If you want different printers, you can maybe copy that file and rename it, like printer1.dat, printer2.dat. And of course, a typo, printer 3. And it makes it easy when you're calling out these files to have a number, so it maybe relates to the register number or the machine number. In the ini file, you can use printers equal. It's basically the same thing. It's just a line in the ini file, has the same effect as the startup switch, and you're going to have a file name that's going to be in your data folder. Register switches down here. If you want to track different cache drawers or what goes into the cache drawer at individual stations, then you're going to want to use a register switch. If you're going to put it all together at the end of the day, it may not matter. Some other common ones are display off. Maybe you have a customer display or poll displays on some computers but not on others. The ones you don't, you add display off. Similarly with a cache drawer or a pin pad or signature capture. So the help file, as I said, I refer to this all the time. Let's take a look at some of the different ones that are in ini files that are more particular to multi-store or that just aren't available on the target line. Your background picture. When you first start Keystroke, you see our lovely mountain scene. If you want to put a picture of your store or something like that, you can assign a different background picture. You know, things like border style and how the cancel icons work, where your departments are. In multi-store, maybe you're going to have a master file for all your departments, categories, and locations. You may not have, you may also have something like a master clerk directory where all your clerks are in a specific file, or a customer directory. These are primarily used with multi-store. There's things like the GUI scale, the graphical user interface, how the ratio of the screens and the fonts work, and various fonts that you can use. You can assign different fonts to Keystroke. You can have menu names and font sizes. So there are quite a few more things that are in ini files. In day-to-day setup and configuration, you're probably not going to use them, but they do give you some more things. One of the things that's specific, if you're using Keystroke to pop up pictures of your inventory, all these PV switches determined how a picture is displayed, where it's displayed, the size, that sort of thing. And some other things as well as the report viewer. All of those can go into your ini file. What I'm going to do, I want to review this really quickly. And I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you have any questions, remember, ini files, startup switches pretty much do the same things. Ini files does allow more configuration if you have a need for it. Printers, print buttons, pin pads, signature capture devices. Use the help files. I use them still all the time if I don't quite remember what's going on.
Question?
Yes.
What is keyhook? I see it on the list there. What is it? It says...
It's not used very often anymore. It has to do, I believe, with a keyboard buffer and locking files. We used to have to use it. As I said, we probably haven't used it in quite some time. When there was a time when Windows would kind of slow down the keyboard buffer, and it would allow keystroke to get priority.
Okay, thank you.
Remember your priorities or your hierarchy for these. The startup switches are going to trump everything. So if it's on the startup switch, on the target line, keystroke's going to use it. If there's something that conflicts in some of these other files, the highest priority or the highest hierarchy is going to win. And some of the common ones that we use are for registers, printers, machine numbers, configuration, temporary resource files, and an any file switch. Does anybody have any other questions?
I have one more. I assume that the DAT files are still limited to 8 characters?
Not specifically limited to 8 characters. They can be bigger now. It does make it easier, though, if you work in DOS to limit them to 8 characters, because otherwise sometimes in DOS it'll do like, if you're doing printers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it might look like print E tilde 5. So if you're looking at it from a DOS prompt. But it can work for more than 8 characters with the naming convention.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. I hope this helped clear a few things up for you. Next week is going to be batch files with Mike Tabor. He's got a very good handle on what batch files can do and can't do and how